I've always been a laid-back guy. I mind my own business, keep my home in order, and expect others to do the same. But my neighbor, Karen, she has no respect for boundaries. At first, it was just annoying behavior, taking people's packages for safekeeping, making passive-aggressive comments about how I wasted space and acting like she ran the whole street. But then, she broke into my garage. She stole my access code, let herself in, and filled my space with her junk without asking. And when I confronted her, she acted like I was the problem. I thought that was the worst of it. Until she called the cops on me. What Karen didn't realize was that I had security footage, an entire neighborhood that was fed up with her, and a plan. Before we dive into this intense story, we have a small favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories reach. Thank you so much. Now let's dive in. I've always been a laid-back guy. I mind my own business, keep my home in order, and expect others to do the same. But my neighbor Karen, she has no respect for boundaries. At first, it was just annoying behavior, taking people's packages for safekeeping, making passive-aggressive comments about how I wasted space, and acting like she ran the whole street. But then, she broke into my garage. She stole my access code, let herself in, and filled my space with her junk without asking. And when I confronted her, she acted like I was the problem. I thought that was the worst of it, until she called the cops on me. What Karen didn't realize was that I had security footage, an entire neighborhood that was fed up with her, and a plan. Before we dive into this intense story, we have a small favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories reach. Thank you so much. Now let's dive in. I've always been the kind of person who keeps to myself. I don't go looking for drama, I don't care about petty neighborhood squabbles, and I definitely don't get involved in other people's nonsense. I bought my house about 5 years ago. A nice little place with a spacious driveway, a 2-car garage, and a backyard big enough for weekend barbecues. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. I work from home most days, have a small friend group, and enjoy the quiet life. Well, I would enjoy it, if it weren't for Karen. Karen moved in a year after I did, and from day one she made it painfully obvious that she considered herself the queen of the street. She wasn't just annoying, she was weird. She'd stand outside staring at people's houses like she was inspecting them for violations. She'd patrol the neighborhood in her little yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, making passive-aggressive comments about everything. If someone left their garbage bins out a few hours too long, she'd send HOA-style complaint letters, even though we don't have an HOA. If a package was left on someone's porch, she'd pick it up and keep it safe until they asked for it back. But the worst part? Karen doesn't believe in personal property. She has zero boundaries. She's the type of person who thinks everything in the neighborhood is shared. She's borrowed people's patio furniture without asking. She's taken plants from neighbors' gardens, saying she was rearranging the landscape. She's even let herself into someone else's backyard to use their trampoline while they were home. I had successfully avoided most of her nonsense until she set her sights on my garage. And once she got the idea in her head, she was not letting it go. The first time Karen mentioned my garage, it seemed harmless enough. I was washing my car in the driveway when she strolled over, iced coffee in hand, fake smile plastered on her face. "Hey there, neighbor," she chirped, leaning against my mailbox like it was hers. I internally sighed. "Hey, Karen." Her eyes flicked toward my garage door, which was wide open. Inside, my car was parked on one side, with the other half neatly organized. Storage bins, a workbench, a few tools. "Wow," she said, tilting her head. "You have so much extra space in there." I frowned slightly. Yeah, I like to keep things organized. She smiled wider, too wide. "You know, my garage is a disaster right now." She sighed dramatically. "Between my husband's tools and all my holiday decorations, we're just so cramped." I nodded slowly. "That sucks." She waved a hand. "Anyway, I was just thinking, since you don't use your garage that much, maybe I could store a few things in there. Just temporarily, of course." I blinked. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Yeah, I don't think so," I said. "I like to keep my space my space." Her smile twitched. "Oh, come on," she said, laughing lightly. "It's not like you're using all of it." "That's not really the point," I said, crossing my arms. She let out a dramatic sigh. "Fine, fine. I just thought we were the kind of neighbors who could help each other out." Help each other out. Right, I shrugged. "Sorry, Karen, I just don't feel comfortable with that." She pursed her lips like she had just tasted something sour, then nodded stiffly. "Okay, no big deal." Then she turned and walked away. I should have known that wasn't the end of it. Over the next few weeks, Karen kept bringing up my garage, sometimes subtly. "Wow, I bet it's nice to have so much unused space." Sometimes not so subtly. "It's just so wasteful to have an empty garage when other people actually need the space." I ignored her. I thought she'd eventually get bored and move on to something else. But Karen doesn't give up. And one day, I came home to find something that made my blood boil. Karen had let herself into my garage, and she had moved her stuff inside. Without asking. The day Karen broke into my garage started just like any other. I had been out for a few hours, running errands and enjoying the peace of a Karen-free morning. But the moment I pulled into my driveway, something felt off. My garage door was open, and inside, there were boxes. Not my boxes, Karen's. At first, I thought maybe I was seeing things. Maybe I had left the garage open by mistake. Maybe a package delivery had been dropped off inside. But no, I got out of my car and took a closer look. There were plastic storage bins stacked against the wall, a few folding chairs, a Christmas wreath, and what looked like an entire set of patio cushions. And the worst part? Karen's husband's old lawnmower, just sitting in the middle of my garage like it belonged there. I felt my blood pressure spike. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Maybe she had misunderstood something. I walked up to her house, knocked firmly on the door, and waited. It only took 3 seconds for her to fling it open. She was already smiling. "Hey there, neighbor," I crossed my arms. "Karen, why is your stuff in my garage?" Her smile didn't even falter. "Oh, I meant to text you about that," she said sweetly. "I figured you wouldn't mind since you're not really using the space." I stared at her. "I explicitly told you no." She waved a hand like I was being dramatic. "Oh, don't be silly. I only took a little bit of space. It's not like I parked my car in there or anything." "That's not the point," I said, voice tight. "You don't get to decide what happens in my garage." Karen sighed. "Well, if you're going to be difficult about it." I felt my eye twitch. "Difficult?" I repeated. She shrugged, arms crossed. "Look, it's not a big deal, and I don't see why you're making it one." I took a slow, deep breath. "Karen," I said, "move your stuff out today." Her eyes narrowed. "I'll move it when I have time," she said flatly. "I'm really busy this week, and it's not like your garage is full or anything." I thought I had handled the situation. I had reset the garage code. I had told Karen to stay out. I had made it very clear that my garage was off limits. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally relax. Then the next morning, I stepped outside and saw it, a bicycle, parked directly in front of my garage door. I blinked, stunned. At first, I thought maybe a neighborhood kid had left it there by accident. But then I noticed the basket on the front, the ridiculous pink seat cover, and the Live, Laugh, Love sticker slapped onto the frame. Karen's bike, of course. She had parked it right up against my garage, leaning it against the door like it was her personal bike rack. I stared at it for a long moment, processing the sheer audacity. She knew I had changed the garage code. She knew she couldn't get inside anymore. So instead of respecting my boundaries, she found a new way to be a problem. I let out a slow, frustrated sigh. I wasn't going to let this slide. I marched straight over to Karen's house and knocked hard. It only took her a few seconds to open the door, already smirking. "Oh, good morning," she chirped. "Lovely day, isn't it?" I didn't waste time with small talk. "Karen, why is your bike parked against my garage?" Her smile didn't even falter. "Oh, that! Yeah, I figured it just makes sense," she said, waving a hand like it was the most logical thing in the world. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She sighed dramatically. "Well, now that you locked me out of your garage, I had to find somewhere else to put it. And your driveway is just so convenient." I stared at her, waiting for her to realize how insane she sounded. She didn't. "I mean, my garage is so cramped," she continued. like we were discussing the weather. And it's a hassle to bring my bike inside the house. But your garage, it's right there. So much easier for me. I let out a sharp laugh, completely dumbfounded. Karen, I said slowly, your bike is blocking my garage. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on! It's not like you need to open it every day. You hardly even use your garage. That's not the point, I snapped. It's my property, not your personal parking spot. Move it. Karen's smile twitched. Wow, she scoffed. You're being really difficult about this. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Unbelievable. I don't care, Karen. Move it now. She folded her arms. I will when I have time. I took a step closer, keeping my voice firm. No, you'll do it right now, or I'll move it for you. Her eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. I took one look at her smug expression, then turned around, walked straight to her bike, and picked it up. Hey! Karen shrieked. What are you doing? I carried her bike down the driveway and set it down on the sidewalk. There, I said. Problem solved. Karen gasped like I had just committed a crime. This is harassment, she yelled. You can't just touch my belongings. I stared at her, completely done with her nonsense. Oh, but you can touch my belongings, I shot back. You think it's fine to park your bike on my property, but the second I move it, suddenly it's harassment? Karen's face twisted in rage. This is completely different, she shrieked. You're being unreasonable. It's just a bike. I crossed my arms. And my garage was just a garage. Yet you took it upon yourself to move half your household into it. She flushed red. I took a slow breath, then shook my head. You know what, Karen? I'm done. You don't listen. You don't respect boundaries. So I'm making this easy. She frowned. What? Before she could finish, I turned around, marched back to my garage, and threw the door open. Then I started hauling every single thing she had left inside out onto the driveway. First, I grabbed her Christmas bins and dropped them onto the curb. Then came the folding chairs. Then her ridiculous floral patio cushions. By the time I got to her husband's rusty old lawnmower, Karen was hyperventilating. Stop it! She screeched. I ignored her. I wheeled the lawnmower out and plopped it next to her bins. Karen stormed forward. You can't do this! I stared at her, dead serious. You have 5 minutes to move this crap before I call the city and have them haul it away. Her mouth fell open. You wouldn't. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Her eyes went wide. Karen had spent so long pushing people around, thinking she could get away with everything. She never expected someone to actually fight back. But I was done playing nice. As soon as I put the phone to my ear, Karen snapped. She rushed over, physically blocking me from making the call. Okay, she shrieked. I'll move it. Just put the phone down. I narrowed my eyes. Now. Karen let out a low growl, then stomped toward her stuff like a bratty child. She started grabbing her bins, muttering curses under her breath as she dragged them back to her driveway. I stood there, arms crossed, watching as she furiously struggled to move the lawnmower. She glared at me. Are you just going to stand there and watch? I smirked. Yep. Her face turned even redder, but finally, after 10 minutes of huffing, cursing, and death glaring, she had all her stuff off my property. I turned back to my garage, dusting off my hands. Good talk, Karen. Then without another word, I slammed my garage door shut and locked it. I thought that was the end of it. I should have known better, because the next morning, the cops showed up at my door. Karen had called the police on me. The next morning, I was enjoying my first peaceful cup of coffee in days when I heard it, a knock at the door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the authoritative, firm kind that immediately made me feel like something was wrong. I set my mug down, took a deep breath, and opened the door. 2 police officers stood on my porch, and standing behind them, arms crossed and smirking like she had already won, was Karen. I sighed. Of course. One of the officers, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes, spoke first. Sir, we received a complaint about you illegally disposing of your neighbor's property. I blinked. Excuse me? Karen immediately jumped in, her voice dripping with fake distress. He threw out all of my belongings, officer, she whined. He tossed my things onto the curb without warning and threatened to have them taken away. I had to physically drag everything back to my house. It was humiliating. I stared at her. Was she serious? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. That's not what happened at all. The officer sighed. All right, why don't you tell me your side? I didn't hesitate. Karen trespassed into my garage, I said plainly. She stole my garage code, moved her stuff in without permission, and refused to take it out when I confronted her. So I put it back on her property where it belongs. The younger officer raised an eyebrow. You're saying she accessed your garage without your permission? I nodded. That's exactly what I'm saying. Karen let out a fake laugh. Oh, come on. It's not like I broke in. I simply borrowed some unused space. The officers exchanged a look, and for the first time, I saw doubt creep into their faces. The lead officer pulled out a notepad. Sir, do you have any proof that she entered your garage without permission? I smirked. Actually, yes. Karen's smug expression dropped instantly. I pulled out my phone and opened my security camera app. One quick scroll, and there it was. Footage of Karen opening my garage, hauling her bins inside, rolling her husband's lawnmower in, and smirking like she owned the place. I held up the phone for the officers to see, Karen's face drained of color. Ma'am, the older cop said, voice turning sharp, you didn't mention you accessed his property without consent. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I just thought... You thought wrong, I cut in. The officer sighed heavily. Ma'am, this is technically trespassing. Karen froze. I didn't mean to, she sputtered. I needed the space. Intent doesn't change the law, the younger officer said. Karen was panicking now. Wait, you're really taking his side? She screeched. I'm the victim here. The older cop rubbed his temples. Ma'am, do you want to press charges against him for moving your things back onto your property? Karen huffed. Yes, he violated my rights. He touched my property. The officer raised an eyebrow. Okay, and do you want to press charges against yourself for trespassing? Karen's face turned purple. What? No, that's not the same thing. The cop shrugged. Actually, it is. If we go forward with a case, you'll both be facing charges. And given that we have video proof of you breaking in, well, he let the sentence hang. Karen went silent. For the first time ever, she looked trapped. So, the officer continued, flipping his notepad closed, are you sure you want to escalate this? Karen gritted her teeth. I could see the war raging in her head. Finally, after a long pause, she huffed dramatically. Fine, I'll drop it. The officers nodded. Good call. Karen glared at me like she wanted to set me on fire. Then she turned on her heel and stomped back to her house. The officers sighed. Sorry about that, one of them muttered. I chuckled. Not your fault. She's just... like that. The older officer nodded. I'd suggest keeping an eye on her. People like that don't let things go easily. I smirked. Don't worry, I'm way ahead of you. I had plans. Karen thought she could push people around, but after today, she was about to learn a very, very harsh lesson. The police had left. Karen had stormed off, but I knew this wasn't over. Karen never let things go. She had spent too long treating the entire neighborhood like her personal kingdom, and after today, she was furious. So I did what any rational person would do. I got ahead of the problem. That very afternoon, I made some upgrades. I installed a new high-tech garage lock that required both a key and a code. I set up an automatic garage door alert system so if it opened without my authorization, I'd know. I put up a no trespassing sign, not just on my garage, but on my driveway. And just for fun, I installed a motion-activated sprinkler near my garage entrance. I wasn't about to let Karen or her bike anywhere near my property again. The next morning, I did something Karen never expected. I sent a neighborhood-wide email. Subject, Unauthorized entry incident, please read. I kept it professional, but direct. Hey neighbors, just a heads up. There was a recent issue with unauthorized entry into my garage. I won't name names, but someone accessed my property without my permission, stored their belongings inside, and then tried to escalate the situation when asked to remove them. I've since upgraded my security and installed motion sensors. If anyone else has had issues with someone treating their property as public storage, you're not alone. Then, for the final touch, I attached a still image from my security footage, one that showed Karen clearly dragging her bins inside my garage. No caption, No accusations, just cold, hard proof. I hit send. And then I waited. The fallout was immediate. Within an hour, I had multiple responses from neighbors. She did the same thing to me, took my patio chairs without asking. I caught her trying to borrow my gardening tools last summer. This is insane. She has been stealing my packages for months. Karen had spent years treating the neighborhood like her personal playground. Now, everyone knew. And the best part? She couldn't even defend herself because she had called the cops on ME. A few days after the police incident, I got a call from an officer. "Just wanted to update you," he said. "We've decided to move forward with a trespassing charge against your neighbor." I blinked. "Wait, really?" He sighed. "Yeah. Given the footage you provided, it's a clear case of unlawful entry. She let herself onto your property, stored her belongings inside, and refused to remove them after being warned. That's a crime." I couldn't help but smirk. "So what happens now?" "Well," the officer said, "she's getting fined. $1,500 for trespassing, $500 for property misuse, and a written warning that further incidents could result in a restraining order. She can either pay the fines or try to fight it in court," the officer added. "But, I wouldn't recommend that." I chuckled. "Yeah, me neither." A month later, I was taking out the trash when I noticed something beautiful. A for sale sign in Karen's yard. I nearly dropped my trash bag from pure joy. And just to make things even better, I saw Karen standing on her porch arguing with her husband. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught bits and pieces. "I told you to stop pissing off the neighbors. Now we have to sell this place? Are you happy now?" "They all hate me, Brad. This whole street is against me." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring every second. Karen had lost. She had been exposed, fined, humiliated, and now she was leaving for good. A couple weeks later, a new family moved in. They seemed normal, nice people. One afternoon, they were outside chatting with some neighbors when I walked by. The new owner waved at me. "Hey, so we heard a lot about the woman who used to live here," he said, laughing. "What was her deal?" I grinned. "Oh," I said, raising my coffee mug, "let's just say she didn't respect boundaries. And for the first time in years, I had peace. Karen was gone, and I had won. If you enjoyed this crazy HOA story, please like, comment, and subscribe. Have you ever dealt with a nightmare HOA president? Let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories."